You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're tuned in to NightVision Radio, exposing the truth, one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies to keep it all from us.
Para mi mamita que me quita mi popó. 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 Para mi mamita que me quita mi popó.
Welcome to NightVision Radio. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. We've got a great one planned for you tonight. Just a couple of little announcements up front before we get right into the heart of the matter. Want to remind everybody that to please visit our Facebook page. It's NightVision Radio on Facebook. And please like us if you would, please. And also come see me on my personal Facebook page, René Barnett, and befriend me if you're interested in hearing more about what we've got coming on. I post it usually on both of those sites, as well as, of course, on the Inception Radio Facebook page and on the Inception site. Also want to remind you guys that we still have that upcoming trip to France in May. It will be the week of May the 10th. We are keeping the group relatively small, and so it should be a lot of fun. And, of course, we'll be with the inimitable Mr. Henry Lincoln, who's the Grand Master of the whole Da Vinci Code mystery and Holy Blood, Holy Grail mystery down in that region, as well as best-selling author Tim Wallace Murphy, who's an expert in the history of that area, as well as especially the Knights Templar, the encoding of Renaissance paintings, and that sort of thing. And tentatively, we have joining us Gloria Amendola, who a lot of you guys that listen to this show and others know of Gloria. She is an author, a teacher, and an intuitive, and she does a lot of work in the area of the studies of Mary Magdalene, which, of course, are very rich in that area. And then also joining us this year will be Gary Evans. I like to call him the human dowser, because he seems to have a special connection with different energies of locations that comes in really handy when we're at these particular sites. So I hope you'll consider joining us if you're feeling the call, because it absolutely is a call, I believe, to this area. And like I always warn everyone, to be careful, because once you go there, you will go back, I guarantee you. I've been back so many times now over the past, 15 years, I guess, by now, that I've lost count. But it's a wonderful place, and we hope that you'll join us for all the history, the mystery, and the magical area, the energies of the waters. It's known for its healing waters, the spa towns that have been there for centuries. In fact, there's a Roman bath that is still in effect and still operational in the village of Rennes-les-Bains, where we'll most likely be staying at Maison Christina's. So give me a heads up if you're interested on Facebook, or shoot me an email. Get in touch with me through Inception. There's a lot of ways you can do it, and let me know. I'll either give you a call if you like, or send you the information. But anyhow, get in touch with me, because we'd love to have you along if you're feeling the pull to go with us. All right, without any further delay, I want to get into tonight's show, and I have to say it's an amazing story. I was thinking about it earlier, and I was thinking about how I was thinking about the year 1970. I was thinking about everything that was going on that year. It was a big year. We still had 5 more years to go on the Vietnam War. but that was the same year that, the Chicago Seven were acquitted in Chicago of inciting a riot. It was also the year, I guess, things we were watching on TV, like it was the debut of Mary Tyler Moore. It was also the same year that we lost Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix. So against that backdrop, we're going to present tonight's story of a young couple in 1970 who were eagerly moving into the first home that they would own and the ensuing events. So tonight, I'd like to welcome Edwin Becker. Hi, Edwin.
Good evening.
And Marsha Becker.
Hi there.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for agreeing to share your story. I was just telling you off the air that I watched the episode of Paranormal Witness in which they featured your story, and it was very intriguing, very well done piece, by the way. And
it really was, yes.
I'd recommend people to watch that. I'm sure it's on YouTube, but I know, Edwin, you have it on your Facebook page. That's Edwin F. Becker on Facebook.
No, just Edwin. Oh, yeah, you're right, Edwin F. Becker on Facebook. Or www.edwinbecker.com.
Yeah, that's what I was just getting ready to say. And also truehaunting.com. So those are the sites that you might want to be kind of looking at as we're going along here. I'd also like to remind listeners that we do have a live chat room going on the Inception Radio Network site, inceptionradionetwork.com. Join us in the live chat room, and if you have questions or comments for our guests, I will try to include them as much as possible. So please join us there. I'm in there along with all my regular chat roomies, and we have a good time in there. So please join us. It's a very active room, and people really get involved in the guests. But now, Ed, I guess we'll start with you. And you, so the year was 1970, and you guys had were just getting ready to have your first baby, and you realized you had to move out of the place where you were. So it was kind of a rush thing that you had to do. It was kind of an emergency.
Yeah, it was an emergency because in those years, in the year 1970, it might as well have been 1870 because we've come so far technologically and culturally and legally, in fact. But in those years, a landlord could just say, no, I don't want any children, and you're out. Get out.
Exactly.
Or I don't want any dogs or pets. And that's basically what happened to us. And Marsha and I had been married 3 years, and we were footloose and fancy-free. We never had a problem. And now, all of a sudden, none of the areas that we considered nicer in Chicago were available to us. And I had to start looking in the inner city, and there were some areas I didn't want to live in. And eventually I tripped over what was called an heir estate in its day. I don't know if they do that still today. But it simply meant that someone had died and they were liquidating the building, which in Chicago, it's not unusual, number one. And people die in these buildings. This neighborhood happened to be built in around the 1890s. So, who didn't die in one of these buildings?
Sure.
They held funerals in the front rooms, for Christ's sake.
And when you saw that it was an heir estate, did that kind of pique your interest? Because are those usually, like young families are usually able to get good deals
that's
on those
the only
types
thing
of properties?
That was the only thing that piqued my interest, was the fact that maybe the heirs would want to unload it quickly, and I could get myself. We didn't have a lot of money, and I couldn't get a conventional loan, which in those years, there were very few avenues for loans. If you were a veteran, I think veterans loans just started to come out, and you had, I didn't know anything about FHA. All there was conventional, which was 20% down, which we did not have. So I figured it was very popular to buy on contract, and I thought maybe I could swing that kind of a deal. So I went to look at this house, and I went by myself. And in my book, sometimes people write me and they get kind of upset because I kind of gloss over, women's rights. I try to tell everybody that women didn't have that many rights in 1970. The bank didn't need my wife's signature because a woman's income didn't count. that you were treated much differently before Gloria Steinem. So I went to look at this building, and it was pretty much dilapidated. I mean, it was in need of repair just about everywhere from tip to toe. But that didn't bother me because I figured I could work on it. And I mean work in capital letters because there were no Home Depots in those years. You did everything singularly. So I had to go to a hardware store, I had to go to a plumbing store, I had to go to a tile store, etc. And I went through there, and if you saw Paranormal Witness, they did some accuracies, they did some inaccuracies. I just explained to a fella on Google who saw the episode, and he said, Ed said these words, but they showed something in the back that wasn't in his book. And the way Paranormal Witness works is they interview you independently, and then they play scenes behind you that you have no control over.
Right, they're recreated with actors,
Yeah,
sort
so
of what's going on. And that's so normal that it's not going to be absolutely true, 100% to the story. I mean, that's very, very regular to happen in TV. So I'm sure there probably were some differences. And now, what was it that the guy saw that wasn't in the book?
I'm actually not sure, but I explained to him that they even took some of my sentences because of the way I speak and my cadence, that they were able to take half of one sentence and half of another and put it together. Which it was okay. I mean, I initially refused paranormal. What happened was I wrote this book 30 years ago, actually, the framework for it, and my family had read it, and a lot of close friends had read it, and my daughter finally pushed me and said, I want to publish it. And I told her to publish it in her name. Her name's Catherine Higdon. And I gave her, I'm not a technological person, so I gave her a flash drive with Word on it and a mock-up of the cover. And she published it as is with my name on it. And I was actually angry. My youngest daughter never listens to me. My oldest daughter listens to everything I say. But I was angry until I found out, hey, this is #1 on the bestseller list in parapsychology. And then it went to #1 on Kindle, and it went to #1 in the UK. And then Paranormal Witness, who is located in London, came after me. And I know about entertainment. I grew up in entertainment when I was a young man. So I knew their job is to make good TV.
Sure.
So I turned them down. I at least angered at least 3 producers before the 4th came at me and promised me that he would try to stay close to the book. And he pretty much did. He did as good a job as you could possibly do, cramming 2 years into 64 minutes.
Yeah.
And the intro was correct. When I first looked at that building, Myra, the old woman, she was the last remaining heir of the family. She was the daughter.
Now, for those who didn't see the film, you go and this is when you're just looking at the property, right? To buy it.
Correct.
Was this
okay? Correct.
So you are going there. I'm assuming with the realtor,
right?
And you come up and please say, tell the listeners what happened, because that was very weird.
Well, I was a young man, and I was inexperienced at buying real estate. And I was nervous. I didn't even know, the correct words. Well, unlike buying a car, there were no tires to kick. I didn't know what routine I'm supposed to go through, actually. So I walked in nervously with the realtor, and we opened the outer door, and it was a 2-story building with an apartment upper and one lower. And I was told that one of the heirs still lived there, the daughter of the actual person who built the building. And she came flying out, and as I tell people and they laugh, that woman that you saw, if you saw Paranormal Witness, was huggable compared to the real Myra.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, she was scary.
Yeah, she came out, she was filthy. She had matted gray hair flying in all directions. She had a little poodle cradled on her shoulder that you couldn't tell whether it was supposed to be gray or white, and just it was biting at her hair. And she came out with the foulest language. I was shocked. I was just set back, and I never heard an old woman talk like that. And then the real estate man met her with the same language. And so I never heard anybody, you're not supposed to yell at your elders, especially an old woman. But they were just going face to face, screaming at each other obscenities. And she kept yelling, "We don't want you here. We don't want you here." And my immediate thought was that her and her little dog Toto that she had on her shoulder. I didn't know any better. And he pushed her back in the apartment, and we proceeded up the stairs. And it was a gloomy building. I mean, the electric had been turned off to the second floor. But I was an inner city child, and I grew up in a broken home. And I had lived in some real dark places in my life. I had also been in a institution. The state actually took me away because of my abusive father. So I felt lots of feelings in my life, and I didn't feel anything that frightened me, actually, except the place was demolished. I mean, when we got to the second floor, it looked like it had been vandalized. Actually, I mean, stuffed furniture had been cut open, and there was pots, pans, papers, clothes all over the place. The only thing I'm thinking is, what's Marsha going to think? Because Marsha was brought up in a upper middle class Tulsa, which was 250,000 people at the time, and very, very clean. All flat, single story. And this is now we're in an urban area, multi-story buildings, very close together, racially mixed. And I'm bringing her to this dump. It's Hubble. But I'm thinking we can make it better, and I wound up buying it and making an offer. And he said, "Yeah, you can try to get it for 5% down." And we made the deal. And I went home and I announced to Marsha that I had bought this building. And I didn't ask the questions of how many times has it been shown, how long has it been for sale. I was just totally ignorant.
Now, this building was a house that had been divided into apartments,
Yeah, it was a 2-story building, 2 apartments. They were fairly well divided. I mean, there were some strange things about it that, all the doors were taken off the bedrooms, which I didn't understand. Because we had a door in the pantry, we had a door in the bathroom, there was a front door and back door, and we had one closet door, but all the bedroom doors were gone on both floors, which was kind of weird. But they were used to, I guess, going back and forth. It was originally a husband and wife, their daughter, and 3 sons.
Now, now this family that owned this home, the old lady who came out to meet you, she was actually like the last surviving member of that family, right?
Correct. And she was crazy as a loon. So the one thing I did in the contract, it was the smartest thing I did, which worked in our favor, was the only contingency I asked for was that she would be gone on the day of possession. And I wrote it strongly in there because I knew she would scare the hell out of Marsha. And then when push came to shove, what happened was we had to pay off the hospital, and I'm writing True Haunting 2, which is going to be a companion book, not a sequel. I hate sequels. But when Marsha was in the hospital and she had our baby, one of the humorous things that I just sort of never thought of was I paid off the obstetrician in cash because we had no insurance. And then when I after we had our baby in the hospital, I called up to make a reservation to pick her up. And they told me I couldn't pick her up. They said, "You can't pick her up until you pay the bill in full." And today, in retrospect, her and I were wondering what the hell would have happened if I didn't have the money. Would she still be there? Would they have just kept her?
Hold the baby for ransom.
Yeah. But I did have the money, and I went and picked her up, and I had to show her the building, and she can tell you her thoughts better than I can tell you because I walked on eggshells. I walked on eggshells. I mean, I drove to the building the most scenic route I could, so she didn't see the neighborhood deteriorate so much. And she found it humorous that I had to tiptoe past that front apartment door. Because I certainly didn't want Myra popping out,
Oh, my gosh.
But, Marsha saw the building, and as far as my take at the time, it was fair. She put on her best face, and she kind of said, "It's nothing we can't fix." Other than you tell it, Marsha, the basement. I mean,
well, the old part, the fact that the house was old, actually was something I liked. I love old things, and I love fixing up old things. So that part to me was great. Didn't scare me at all, and I'm all for it. But the closer I got to the house, the worse I started to feel. And it just gave me a real creepy feeling in my stomach, and I just didn't even want to go in, actually. But I did, because I didn't want Ed to feel bad. It's not like we had a lot of choices.
Right.
So it was more, please help us find something type of thing. However, I managed to do that, and I managed to get upstairs and see the place. But when Ed started to take me down and showed me the basement where he was going to put the washer and dryer, because there were already hookups down there, he walked in ready, thinking, okay, it's a basement, and it's a creepy basement, and I'm not going, he's thinking I'm not going to like it because of that. I hate spiders and, things like that. So I'm still trying to be brave, and I don't want him to feel bad. I took 1 foot into the basement and backed right back out. And I said to him, I will never come in this basement. There was something so bad in there and so evil in there, I couldn't even make myself walk through the door.
And this was the very first time you were in the house?
Yes.
The first time she saw the house. I didn't understand it. The basement, the house itself was built on ground level, and then it was lifted up on cinder blocks. And then sometime after that, they dug out a basement, and the basement was built. It was it was crude concrete, and it had a low ceiling. So I'm 6'3", and if you can imagine me with Cuban heels on shoes, I'm more like 6'4", 5". I had to always be ducking all the time. And in fact, I still have probably a couple scars in my head from hitting the rafters. So that it was dark, it was gloomy, it was filthy, and I figured basements aren't something you see in Tulsa a lot.
No.
Usually
That's right.
going underground kind of means that there's a tornado coming.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's a storm cellar. Yeah.
Exactly.
That was kind of my take on it, was that she's not used to basements. This is awfully ugly. I had been in uglier basements in my life. At least there were no rats down there. There was any. I've been in basements where, in Chicago, we got rats as big as possums, and
oh my goodness.
Something I don't want to know about.
But it was,
Yeah.
But I figure her take on it was that, whatever she wanted, I wanted to do if she'd accept this property. Because, I wasn't sure whether she'd look at it and say, I want a divorce,
No.
But that wasn't her take.
Goodness.
No.
So I remedied that very easily by running a gas line to the back porch, which was enclosed, and I put a dryer out there, and we bought in those days they had what was called it was made by Hoover. It was a washer and wringer that you could put on your sink. It had a sink attachment, and so she could do all her laundry in the kitchen, and then she could dry her stuff on the enclosed back porch, which was all window lined, and she never had to go to the basement.
No going down to the basement. Yeah.
No, I was never, and I didn't. I was never going to that basement, and I did not go to that basement. Oh. I knew there was something in there I didn't want to meet.
Now, really, Marsha, you were the one who started kind of seeing things first because you were in the house more. You were staying home. You had a tiny baby.
Oh, yeah.
And so you were there while he was out at work. And when you first started to see things, what was the first thing? Was it the dish, the crystal dish that you set down, or was that just the first thing in the show?
No, that was pretty much not exactly the way they did it. I was one of these people that I wanted everything in place and moved in one day. So, although we didn't have a lot, so that wasn't that hard. But as the boys were bringing in boxes, I was unpacking and putting stuff away. I was going at warp speed and I wanted to set this place up so we could sit down for dinner and start our life. So I reached in, I pulled out my prize candy dish. Everybody knows about me and my candy dish. And I set it in the middle of the coffee table. Not the dining room table like they had, but the coffee table. Mm-hmm. And I turned around and reached in, and there was a matching ashtray that came with it. Of course, in those days, everybody smoked.
That's right. Everybody had ashtrays sitting around their houses.
Yep. So I reached in and I turned around, and the candy dish was on the edge. And I thought, no, I put that in the middle. I'm too careful with this thing. It's crystal. It's, my only real prized possession. And I'm, very careful with it. So I put it back and laid down the ashtray and reached in the box for whatever else was in there, unpacking it, turn around. Again, the candy dish was on the edge. And I thought, I'm losing it. Well, eventually I told Ed, and Ed said, oh, you wax things too much, and maybe the floor is not even, because it's an old house. And so we're thinking the thing is sliding. So my grandmother had sent some handmade doilies that she had made as a wedding present, and I really had never lived in a place where I could display them, and we have the doilies. So I went and I pulled them out, put one on the table, put the candy dish on the doily, thought, now I can't move, and left the room and came back in, and it was on the edge.
Was the doily on the edge too? I don't know why I'm even asking.
No,
that,
I understand that, because it would make sense if the whole thing moved.
Yeah.
That I wished it had, because at least I could have still thought the floor is uneven. So everything's sliding. But no, it was just the candy dish. Not the ashtray, not the doily, just the candy dish. Because it knew, later we figured all this out, but they know what's important to you. They know what's going to scare you. They know your fears. Those are the kind of things they do to mess with you.
They didn't mess with me initially. I was a true... Besides being a creature of logic, which I still am today, I don't believe in coincidence. I believe everything adds up and makes sense in some way. But I was a non-believer, and then, so I rationalized for a long time. I rationalized everything. And then what spirits do, for those out there listening, if you think you're going to be subject to a haunting, or if you're an investigator, what spirits do is they don't pop out at you like in the movies. They don't. If they did that, it would have scared the hell out of us, and we would have been gone. All right. What they do is they start to work on you emotionally and energy-wise. That they definitely. I was on a program recently with some investigators that take people on haunted tours, and it's very, very common. Everybody knows that if you go on a haunted tour, or if you're an investigator, that these things, if you run across a decent, strong entity, it's going to drain your batteries.
Yeah.
So what I told the investigator is I wrote in what I called the Becker, which is kind of like the Miranda. And I said, from now on, you better read your guests and warn them that they're traveling at their own risk if they have a battery in their body that they depend on. If they have a pacemaker, a defibrillator, a hearing aid, they will drain that sucker, dry, and you won't find out until you need it. So the hearing aid guy will find out right away. The pacemaker guy is going to get screwed.
Goodness. Can you hold it right there and continue right after the break? We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back with Ed and Marsha Becker. Hang in there.
everyone. Lori and Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best. Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hey, IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to NightVision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth, one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Welcome back to Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, René Barnett, and tonight we're talking with Marsha and Ed Becker. Ed is the author of a book called True Haunting, about their experiences in their very own haunted home in 1970. Have a look at the website, truehaunting.com and edwinbecker.com to see more about the book and about the Becker story. Also, if you want to go over to Facebook to Edwin F. Becker, there is a copy right there on the front page of a film that was made by the Sci-Fi Network called Paranormal Witness. It was a series in which this particular episode features Ed and Marsha's story. So we were talking about how these things do affect people, and is particularly with batteries. And I always thought about that when it comes in terms of cameras. I've been to places that were, deemed to be haunted with television crews and found, that our cameras wouldn't work at those particular sites, or that, you're right, the battery would drain. But I hadn't thought about the idea that, some people have batteries that keep them alive. And
Exactly.
that could be very, very dangerous for people to go to a site like that.
Yeah, and it's not like an energy. A ghostly energy is going to discriminate and say, "Oh, I'm not going to hurt that guy. I'll take this guy's battery." It's going to drain energy wherever they find it, and whether it's emotional or whether it's hardwired electricity, which is why we're talking about all the emails I get. I probably have another stack of 200 emails or more where people's lights flicker or things go on and off.
And you were saying earlier, off microphone that you've gotten thousands of letters from people, sort of asking you, what do I do with my place? Or this is going on in my house. And you're saying that some of these phenomena are not that uncommon.
No, they're not that uncommon. And in fact, the greater percentage of phenomena is it's benign. It's not out to harm you. And one recent case I had, I mean, it was the fellow had a television, and it would go on and off. And he wrote me, and he said, you know, his TV just goes on and off, or it'll change channels. And I told him, I said, the first thing you want to try, because the one thing I do know is these things can be very, very territorial. I said, move the television for the hell of it. I said, move it to the other side of the room. That's all it took. He moved it to the other side of the room, and I said, you were probably in this person. They might have had their favorite chair there. Who knows what the story could have been. It's not out to harm you. You just violated its territory. And that's probably something I did when I bought the building, because I was an ignorant young man. And the first thing I did is I met a fellow who lived down the alley from me. He owned a secondhand store. And he wanted an old concrete mixer. It was a hand mixer that I had in the backyard. And he said, can I buy it from you? And I said, I'll tell you what, you got a store. If you'll come in and clean out, because I had to get this ready for Marsha and for us to move in within weeks. So I said, if you'll come into the apartment and just clean the place out, everything. I said, you can have it all, including the mixer, everything. So he happily did so. And I never thought that, you know, these things do have a sense of domain, and sometimes they do have attachments. I may have immediately had declared war on them, you know, by doing that. But I wasn't a believer, and I was ignorant, and I certainly was not afraid of ghosts. There were no such thing as ghosts in 1970, other than maybe you'd hear from Hans Holzer every now and then on Johnny Carson. But there were vampires and there were other things, but all the ghosts were friendly. It was the ghost of Mrs. Muir. It was
Casper.
If you remember,
Right.
Yeah, Casper, Topper. You know, these were the Canterville ghosts. I mean, all these people were friendly, and they were jesters, and you know, so I had nothing to be afraid of myself. And when Marsha started describing phenomena to me, I basically punished her in a way, because now I look back and I feel bad, but I thought, well, she was used to doing what she wanted and working when she wanted to and being outdoors. Now she's got a baby, her chemistry's changed. I thought she's going a little wacko.
Thanks.
You know, I mean that was my feeling. Is she's a little bit chemically unbalanced, and I'll just go with it, you know, unless it gets, you know. So
you probably have all the women up in arms right now. But you know, it could. I can see how you might have thought it might be something like, you know, postpartum depression, which I don't know that they'd identified back then as much as they have now.
But I had an English lady that wrote me that she just put it so. She read some of my work. She liked my work, and she was very complimentary. But she said to me, in reading True Hauntings, she said, "You were a most objectionable young man."
Most objectionable.
Yes, that was so cool.
But what these things do is they size you up. These energies, I believe that they sensed who I was, and they sensed that I wasn't afraid, and they sensed that Marsha was more sensitive than I was, and they started working on her, and it started to create friction between us, because one of the main things it did that really made me crazy was it would take the phone off the hook. Now, in 1970, you couldn't own a telephone. You had to lease it from the phone company. Very expensive, and to get a jack put in, to plug it in, was very expensive. So we could afford one phone. We put it strategically in the middle of the house. It wasn't real easy to see, but it was easy to get to, and the old ringers were loud, so not a problem. It took the phone off the hook. Well, I'd call home during work to find out how things are and how she's doing and how's the baby. I'd get a busy signal. There was no call waiting. In fact, there were no area codes or even everything was operator assistant. And you got billed for every unit, every minute, whether it was local or not. So I was mad. It was like, number one, she's on the phone all damn day, and number two, we can't afford this. So I'd come home and I'd be just steaming, and she would greet me with this face that was so innocent, and it was like, what are you mad about? And I'd say, you're on the phone all damn day. Who the hell are you talking to? Blah, blah, blah. And I had a pretty good temper, and I'd be upset. And we'd look in the front room, and there the phone's off the hook. And she'd say, well, the phone's off the hook. Well, to salvage my display, I'd say, well, you should have checked it. My assumption was the dog knocked it off, the cat knocked it off,
Yeah.
The last thing on my mind was that, guess what, a ghost took it off, In those years, I could have wrote, this is a haunted house on the building, and the police probably would have arrested me for defacing a building. But it started to get on us to where we were emotionally, if my wallet or my keys were moved, I'd say to Marsha, where'd you put my keys? She'd look at me like I was crazy. I haven't touched your keys. And I'd find them on another table, or I'd find them somewhere else, or my wallet would be somewhere else. And they would work on you emotionally and weaken you. And
well, that's what I said before. They know what bothers you. They know your fears, and that's what they take. They take that part of you, and they throw it back at you.
Yeah, if they're malevolent, if it's a malevolent spirit, you're in for a good ride.
Yes, definitely.
And because they'll take their time, and it's subtle, and it's continuous, and they will stay on you and gradually drain you. And eventually, Marsha and I we didn't sleep well. Of course, you're going to have nightmares. You become sleep deprived. You start attributing everything because your wallet's missing and your keys are missing and you can't find them. Now, if you really do misplace something, you start to blame them also for that, and you start to look around and get paranoid. It's a long, long process. Most investigators, when they go out and they say, we ran in and got a bit of evidence and they ran out, I'm not impressed by anything, simply because you're not going to see the true force of those things unless you stay there a month.
No, and you add wanting to protect a child on top of that. It adds
my gosh.
A great deal of pressure.
Well, my first resort was, and it really didn't have to do, I still wasn't a believer, but it was just a tradition in my family. I was raised a Catholic, a Latin Catholic. I was an altar boy and all that good stuff. And it was to get the building blessed. And I figured that would also probably put Marsha's mind at ease. It would help her. And we invited the priest over. And after our daughter was christened, the family, unlike Paranormal Witness, our whole family was there and friends. We had about 16 people.
It was a house full, right?
And we had a buffet set up, and it was going to be a real celebration. And I walked with the priest, and as we walked up the front stairs, Myra had locked the outer door. And I knew Marsha didn't do it. And so I got my key out, and no sooner than Myra heard the key, she came flying out. And she aimed directly at the priest, and she started cursing him out.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was, angry. I was embarrassed.
Okay, so Myra was still there?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess what I failed to tell you was
right.
when we went to closing, I had a contingency, a rather strong contingency that she's out.
Right.
Well, what happened was none of their family would take her. So they came back to me when it came close to closing, and they said, can she stay another 90 days to 120 days? And I didn't have the money to close. This is God's truth. So I figured out quickly how much money I needed to close. And I said to them, yes, she can stay if you pay me this amount.
Up front.
Right. And they absolutely agreed. No one was going to take her into their home. You'd have to be crazy. Into a cage, maybe, So they gave me the check that actually allowed me to close the building, but we had to live with Myra for a little over 3 months and almost 4 months. And she broke into Marsha's kitchen once and raving and screaming, and we had a number of clashes with Myra.
Oh my gosh, she would have been more terrifying to me than the ghosts. But I had you mentioned something earlier about. You said that they seemed to be, Marsha seemed to be bothered by these more initially, and you felt that, that Marsha was more sensitive, which, probably is true because I think women generally are more sensitive to things like this, more intuitive. It comes, I think, from being moms, but also I have another idea that, because of some of the things that you found, Ed, in the house, down in that basement, that shed some light on the previous owner, I have a feeling that he might have been bothering her because she was a young, attractive woman. And and it had something to do with, with her being female.
Paranormal Witness did a nice job, and our producer, Mark Lewis, stayed in touch with us. Our interviews were actually in the first week in April. They didn't finish production on it. They decided we were going to be the finale pretty quick because it was the production people from X-Files in Toronto that did the filming. And they filmed so many scenes that they did not want to give up, that they said, okay, we're going to make it 90 minutes and you'll be the finale. And they tried as hard as they could. He would call me for every change, and I objected to a few things. My sister was not found in an alley. I didn't. I invited in the priest for the house blessing, so I was not against it. I was for it. They had some distortions, but he did a pretty damn good job, I thought, telling the story in 64 minutes.
I think really the blessing was the beginning of the worst of it. That was, I think, at that point it was declared war.
It showed itself.
Yeah.
At least one of the entities, in the end we were told there were at least 5.
Yes.
One of them showed itself then because I didn't recognize it. No one recognized it, actually. But the priest, I believe himself, maybe Marsha had an inkling, but the priest came in, and of course he was a little bit upset about the Myra incident, and he was kind of off his game, and he decided that he wasn't going to stay for brunch or lunch or buffet. He was just going to bless the house and go, which I kind of understood. He put on his stole, and he took out his holy water dispenser and his little book of rituals, and he started in the front room, and I had been an altar boy, so I had been an assistant on many house blessings, and he started where he should have started, in the center of the house, and then you go to each bedroom, and every room gets blessed. He raised his hand with a brass holy water dispenser, and unlike the movies, it didn't make a big kaboom or anything like that. He just raised his hand, and the brass thing just shattered. So it was like if he had an egg in his hand and he crushed it or something. That's exactly what happened. And no sound, no nothing.
The brass...
Brass,
it shattered.
Holy water dispenser shattered like glass?
Yes.
Yes, like if it was an eggshell or something.
Right.
Kind of exploded or something, or
it didn't explode.
No, it just kind of crumbled.
It just kind of crumpled, and the brass, it fell straight down, all the pieces of brass. He immediately crossed himself and bent down and started picking up pieces.
The look on his face.
I was kind of puzzled because I was very familiar with that utensil, and it was like I never saw brass. Typically you could throw one on the sidewalk and you can't break it. You know? So he was completely confused and I believe frightened.
He was.
We didn't recognize it, and he got up and he said, "I must go." Simply, very simply, "I must go." And I said, "No, you're going to bless my daughter's room." And he said, "No, I'm leaving." And I said, "No." And I grabbed his shoulder, and he was a little guy, and I could have just grabbed him by the neck. I said, "You're going to bless my daughter's room." And he went into her room, and he basically, shook some of the water that was on his hand, and basically said the blessing in hyperspeed Latin, and then he ran out. And I thought I had been a performer in my youth. In fact, that's how Marsha and I met. I was a professional musician traveling the country. And so I thought he had like a stage fright or something, that his ritual went wrong and he just lost his composure. I figured I'd just make a simple phone call and I'll get him back during the week and we'll get the house blessed, no big deal. When he left, he created an incident that, made everybody laugh afterward. They all had to hold back because we had a closet door and a front door in the middle of the building, in the middle of our apartment, and he went into the closet. He actually went into the closet. So he didn't open it and say, oh, this is a closet. He was kind of looking in all directions, opened the door and walked in. And then he started to close the door. And all of us, my mother, my brother, my friends, were all looking at each other like, what the hell is he doing? And then he came out, caught what he was doing, grabbed the front door. Meanwhile, I had a donation, which is typical for the ritual. You give to the priest, and my blind friend was holding it. He'd been blinded in Vietnam. And he was just holding out the envelope, thinking the priest was going to see it and take it. The priest blew right by him, so I grabbed the envelope, and I chased the priest literally down the stairs. And he took that, I'll always remember it, he took that envelope like you do a baton in a relay race. Actually, he kept moving forward, but he put his hand back. And I had ran track and relay. So it was like, holy crap, this guy is really motivated to get the hell out of here. But he left it, and Marsha's probably right. We probably declared war. We took it to another level.
Yes. After
that. And everything became more active. We started to hear audible things.
Right.
When did Myra finally leave? Someone in the chat room is asking if the activity decreased when she left. They thought maybe she was connected to the poltergeist activity.
No, we had hoped so, because there were a lot of noises and things that we kind of attributed to Myra. We were hearing footsteps on the back porch, and we figured it's Myra out there. But it wasn't. And there were some strange things that we look back at now. And, in fact, it was a reader of my book that wrote me, and they said, did Myra's dog ever make any noise? And it wasn't until, 42 years later, Marsha and I are sitting there thinking, we never heard that dog make any noise.
No.
Even when I'd yell in Myra's face, that dog wouldn't even acknowledge me. And then when they moved her out, she moved out almost 4 months later. In early March, late end of February, early March. And when she left, the apartment was clean. I expected, because we never saw Myra come and go, and we never saw the dog being let out. So we figured she must be letting the dog do its business in the house. When she left, the place was, other than dust and dirt and not being cleaned, it was clean. There was no evidence an animal had ever been there. And when she left, it was happy days are here again, because you kind of said it earlier. You said you're more afraid of people. So was I. Okay, as a young man, I was more afraid of people, especially if you grew up in the inner city. Ghosts, that's their airbags or nothing, and that was my attitude. I was very, very disrespectful, and I even agitated them. I got one to actually perform for me. But my take on the family at that point was that they were all nuts. All right? I mean, Myra was clearly crazy. Whether she was possessed or oppressed or just insane, I don't know. And I knew that I found a Ouija board in the house that was well worn. So they may have conjured something for all I knew. But I didn't know anything much about conjuring. I just knew that Ouija boards are bad. That's what I was taught. But what I found in the basement, Paranormal Witness did not do a good job with that. Because what I found was a storage shed that was completely filled with early pornography. So it had early nudist magazines. It had all kinds of magazines. And then the most disturbing part, the magazine's okay. Everybody, Playboy was brand new, pretty much brand new, and men had their places, but this place was Ben's. and on the back wall were shoeboxes stacked up, about 6 high, at least 4 feet wide, because that was the shed. If you can imagine how many boxes that would be. They were filled with clippings. Now, they weren't just clippings thrown in there. They were neatly cut out in approximately the same size, rubber band like baseball cards. And when we started looking at the clippings, my younger brother and I, they were cutouts of women's body parts. And it didn't matter if it was a photograph or a cartoon or whatever. He'd cut that part out and put it in his collection. And, I mean, even my 14-year-old brother, who was 10 years younger than me, he said, this guy's freaking nuts. So as time went on, I started talking to him. You know, I called him Ben, and I said, Ben.
Now Ben was the former owner of the house, right?
Well, he was the last living male that lived there. He had had a heart attack. He had a heart attack in the bathroom upstairs, which you know, it never frightened me. I mean, initially, or hearing anything about that, because, like I said, if you're living in a city, if you're in Chicago or New York or Cleveland or Washington or Baltimore, you're going to move into an old building where a lot of people passed away.
Yeah.
I mean, not all of them stay here on Earth. Hopefully.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
And not all of them are going to be malevolent.
All right.
But the one thing that I know today is that some of these spirits have a sense of domain that we no longer understand. Because when this person built the house that we bought, he built it thinking that he would live there. Certainly his children would live there because they did. And if he had grandchildren, they would live there. And they weren't a mobile society like we are. They held on to it. I mean, they had a sense of domain that we can't duplicate today. And I think that's what holds a lot of spirits to this earth. But we were I wasn't sure, you know, you never get, people ask me about research and stuff like that. I don't much believe in it because it's interesting, it's educational, but you never get introduced to your spirit formally. So you don't know what the heck you're dealing with. And it's much like I get in major arguments with people who are in favor of using Ouija boards. Because you open up a Ouija board, and if you do open one up, and you're able to create an opening, the other side of the Ouija board that you can't see is like a prison. So if you were in a prison and the warden said, hey, you guys can use the phone, guess who's going to be first in line? The biggest and the baddest. The baddest and the meanest. Well, what the hell do you think is on the side of the Ouija board? All right, now you're going to say, can I talk to my Uncle Joe or my Aunt Mary? And he's going to say, sure, you know, I'm Mary. And I know people. I know one fellow who he carries his Ouija board has trapped him. You know, unlike what people think, the evil or the demonic does not come at you in a scary way. It seduces you.
Wow.
So that all your initial things with the Ouija board are going to be friendly, and gradually it's going to try to control. It's going to hope you come back. It's going to give you a little more. It's going to get you to where you're dependent on it. And I know a fellow who carries this around. He's a trucker. He puts it in his truck. He thinks he's communicating with a past soulmate. He has not a clue. And Ouija boards are very, very dangerous.
Hold that thought. I have another Ouija board question for you when we come back from this break. We'll be right back with Ed and Marsha Becker. Hang in there with us, please.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4 $9.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO sky watches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best. Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hey, IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to Night Vision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Welcome back. You're listening to Night Vision Radio, and I'm your host, René Barnett. Joining me tonight are Ed and Marsha Becker. Ed is the author of True Haunting. Look it up on truehaunting.com or on edwinbecker.com or on Edwin F. Becker on Facebook, where you'll also find a copy of the video of the episode of Paranormal Witness, which was it's a nice long episode too. I think it was 90 minutes when it aired. Of course, without all the commercials, it's a little bit over an hour, I think. So have a look at it. It's very, very well done. And according to the Beckers, it was pretty well represented, or representative, I should say, of their story. A few things that differed, but of course, that's always going to happen. Now, we were talking about Ouija boards before the break and how you did find one in the house. It seemed to have been well worn, and, you know, you were thinking that perhaps someone had sort of opened up something there, created a portal or created an opening through which these entities could have come. But I noticed in the film that there was a time when your sister moved into the house.
Yeah.
And there was a Ouija board involved in that story. Can you just tell me a little bit about that, Ed?
Yeah. The Ouija board I found was well worn, and I just demolished it when we first moved in. I didn't even mention it to anyone. My little brother was the only one that knew because he was helping me. But when my sister moved in, what happened was our first tenants, they went through in a flash because they moved in. The next thing we knew, they were asking to break their lease, and they moved out. As far as we knew, they were happy. The story of what happened to them is horrific. Dan was on Paranormal Witness, and you'll read about it in True Haunting 2 this summer. But then my sister moved in, and, you know, Marsha and I did not know what was in the first floor. Had I known what happened to Dave and Ellen, as I call them in the book, I would have never released it to her, regardless of anything. But my mom came on and she stressed, you know, that I should give my sister a bargain. It's close to where my brother-in-law was working. I could never say no to my mother. My sister was a strong personality, and she moved in, but she was a bit of, a 70s flower child. So she had these friends that were kind of strange and, new age and looking for mind expansion and crap. And we had no idea. Yeah. That wasn't who I was. I was a musician. I was pretty liberal, but I didn't believe in any of that. Because you had people running around in those years where I'm dropping out, man. We're going to go to a commune.
Yeah.
I used to tell him, yeah, go ahead. That sounds like a good idea. and Marsha would say, why did you tell him that? And I'd say, less competition in the job market. God. Let him go out in the desert, learn the hard way. But my sister was one of those, and I really didn't get involved in her personal life. I didn't know that. My brother-in-law was very tolerant of her, and she had friends, and they started to conduct seances. Now, if you read the book, you find out that, I was working full-time 10 hours a day, and then I got a second job after the exorcism failed. All this happened after the exorcism failed. And, we should talk about the exorcism a little bit. But my sister brought in people. Since the exorcism failed, we had been on the news, and she kind of felt it was like a celebrity house. And I got ghosts. I live where they got the ghosts, and she was bragging about it. And people were coming over that wanted to make contact, and I'm working 2 jobs, so I'm leaving at 5:36 in the morning, and I'm coming home at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Marsha starts to observe different things, and my sister starts with the seances and the Ouija board. And the first time she told me, I was exhausted. And she was talking about something, and I just basically said, yeah. I just want to go to sleep, It was some months later, or a month later at least, and then Marsha was a little more, she cracked me one, and she said, listen to me, your sister's using a Ouija board.
Right.
And I went berserk. I went downstairs, I banged on the door, she opened the door, I said, give it to me. There were a lot of expletives. I grabbed it, I smashed it into 1,000 pieces. I told her, I said, if I ever see one or hear one in the house, I'm going to throw you completely out in the street. I said, that night I'll start throwing your furniture out the damn window. I knew it was a mistake, Now, by that time, I was no longer a non-believer. I might have still been in a little bit of denial, but I was sure we had a problem. And I knew that the Ouija board could do nothing but contribute to it. And
when she had used the Ouija board, did something happen, or did she report to you that, something odd had happened with the Ouija board?
Well, I started to have, it was actually through Marsha. Marsha started telling me things that I'd half listen to, because I was usually tired. I was working, I lied in the book. I was actually working 3 jobs. So I had an evening job, and then I had a weekend job. Programming was starting to proliferate, and I was starting to get some work beside my full-time job. So my sister started to have knowledge that she couldn't have had. And at first I wrote it off to maybe she's talking to the neighbors too, like I did. But she wasn't. She was getting it through the Ouija board. So
knowledge
she absolutely...
knowledge about the house or the people, or...
The people, a certain entity that we called Henry, a dark energy. From what I've learned from the exorcist and the psychic, he was the darkest energy. And, after 40 years, I look back, and now I know what happened to Dan's wife, which I call Dave and Ellen. I never knew that Ellen was tormented. I never knew that she demanded that she gets out of the house.
And these were your tenants. These were your tenants.
Yeah. Right. So, and she was driven a little bit off center by what they experienced. So, later when I analyzed it, it was like, boy, oh boy, it picked on every woman for sure. Because I saw Myra.
Yes.
I saw Ellen. And then in the end, my sister basically disappeared. She went through all the various, today, if you talk to an exorcist, a true exorcist, let's say the Archbishop Ron Fale, he's got an order of the exorcists, which I just think is outstanding. But if you talk to a true exorcist, there's stages that a person goes through. And, depression and oppression, and you start to have these stages, lack of hygiene. Eventually you become suicidal. My sister was going through all those stages, except that it was invisible to me because I was always working. And in the end, what happened is she was hearing voices. The voices were telling her to commit suicide. And she disappeared in the middle of the night. And it was at a point where we already moved out. And the next thing I knew, my brother-in-law called me and said, she's gone. April's missing. And I didn't have a clue because I didn't know her friends really. I didn't know her habits. And in Chicago, if there was no sign of foul play, the police paid no attention for 3-4 days. And then they might put out a thing for a missing person.
Right.
They certainly weren't going to investigate anything. And they found her, eventually she was living with a group of, some type of cult in Cicero, Illinois. And that was the end of her marriage and everything else. Her life crumpled.
Oh, my goodness.
And it got worse from there. I mean,
did you speak with her after that?
Oh, yeah.
We saw her a number of times, but we didn't speak to her immediately after. We saw her, I'd say at least a few years later, and she was not the same person. And in fact, with respect for my family, I won't get into details.
Yeah.
But she was abusing her children, and unlike what society believes, child abuse is an economic recognition. If Marsha and I abused our child and lived pretty much an upper middle class life, our doctor looked at our child, and if he saw a bruise, he questioned Christine or Catherine and said, where's that from? If you're in the inner city, like my sister lives, she smashed my nephew in the face with a metal train, split his lip. They took him to the hospital, and the hospital stitched him up. He told the doctor who did it. My sister admitted she did it, and they didn't do crap. All right? Because abuse in the lower income economic level is common. That's why you hear of all these tragedies with DCF and things like that. I mean, there's places where they didn't want to go in Chicago. I mean, I lived in Cabrini Green before they tore it down in my youth.
Oh,
Nobody
wow.
wanted to go in there. They would throw kids right off the balconies, off the 21st floor. What happened was my sister went down a dark road, and Marsha and I tried to adopt her children. And at first she agreed, and then she backed out of it because we wanted to take the children from her. She was getting a little bit too violent and abusive. And the end of the story is the whole end of the story is not good for anybody. But it was whether she was possessed or oppressed or whatever, she was through her life diagnosed with schizophrenia, manic depression, at one time epilepsy, possessed. Everybody had something that they were calling her, but she was certainly pretty crazy. In the end, she resembled Myra. And I'll just simply say that she alienated everybody in her life. She passed away last year.
Oh, gosh.
And she wound up as an unclaimed body in Cook County morgue.
Oh, my goodness.
And fortunately...
And all this decline happened after she lived in the haunted house?
Yes.
Yes, her life was never the same.
Wow. Oh, my goodness.
Her life was never the same.
That is...
And fortunately, they don't bury Jane Doe's. They, Cook County, Illinois, they do a hell of a job trying to locate some relative, and they finally located her daughter. And fortunately, my sister was put to rest properly. But she got to where she wouldn't talk to anybody in the family. She didn't come to our mother's funeral or burial. She was basically hearing voices. She lived a life in a studio apartment with the lights and radio on 24/7. She would talk to people that you and it was real bad.
Oh,
now she went against what happened was we were desperate, and Marsha was actually the one that found. I know we don't have a whole hell of a lot of time left, so I'm going to try to capsulize
I wanted to get into that exorcism now. When you were talking about when the exorcism failed, you're not talking about that initial cleansing or blessing that priest gave, right? You're talking about a second event.
Yeah, and it was historic. It was because in a day when there were only 3 channels and your nightly news was 30 minutes,
ABC,
24
NBC,
minutes probably.
Yes.
They gave us 6.5 minutes of their 24 minutes.
Wow.
And they also used it as a segment on their NBC program, First Tuesday, which we couldn't see because it ran as news in Chicago, so they didn't allow it. There were some kind of FCC rules. But we had a psychic come in, and he decided, he was a true psychic, he decided it was more than he could handle. There was something there he couldn't handle. So he actually called for a Catholic exorcist, and the Catholic exorcist refused because of protocol. He said it would take him 6 months to get approval. So he brought in an Anglican exorcist, and they attempted to cleanse the building. And Carol Simpson, a premier reporter, she went on to be actually the first female and black female news anchor on the national news out of Washington.
She's a wonderful person.
Wonderful person. She was the premier reporter, and because there was a book written about this particular psychic, I guess somehow NBC got hold of it, and they approached us and they said, "Can we film what he's going to do there?" And much like Paranormal Witness, I said no. You know, I wasn't going to have my face glued on television as a crazy man, because that's all we ever got from anybody, was that we're psychologically imbalanced. But then he approached me and he said, "Ed, I've got a book out, and it would help me." And he never asked us for a dime. And so I said, "I'll do whatever you like." So we allowed it to be played, and it was played. What happened, it was meant to do a spot on the NBC News. And Carol Simpson called us, and she said, "Ed," she said, "our switchboard lit up like a Christmas tree." And she said, "So it's going to run at 10 o'clock. And then after 10 o'clock, she called it, and she said, never stopped. She said, "We're going to run it tomorrow night on the evening news and then late night news." They wound up running it for 4 days over the weekend. And
that's unheard of.
I was going to say, I don't think I've ever seen that.
No.
Yeah, it's the YouTube footage, but it was not with the flaws.
No, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen them play a story like that.
Exactly.
No,
it was absolutely the first paranormal event ever broadcast and ever taken seriously. It's something I guard. You know, I've had a number of people. We've talked to a number of movie people, and I guard that fact. You know, it's going to have to be made well. If somebody wants the rights to it, they're going to have to do a quality thing, because it is historic. But yeah, the exorcism failed, and they knew it failed.
Yeah,
and
big time.
Everybody held our hand. I mean, Carol Simpson stayed in touch with us. The psychic Joseph D. Louise, who I dedicated the book to, was just incredible. I mean, he changed me from being an angry young agitator. I was probably a Zach Baggins before Zach was born. Because I yelled at him, I swore at the ghosts, I was angry. And he taught me to have compassion, to understand that these were people, to have some respect.
At one time, sure.
That I should rely on my faith and pray, to ignore much of the activity, if I could, not to acknowledge it, not to feed them energy, certainly for Marsha and I not to argue and create friction. So I owed Joe DeLuise a lot. But yeah, the exorcism failed, and that kind of made the building.
Did anything occur during the exorcism, like what happened during the cleansing of the house? Was there any activities?
Yeah, there was a number of things. I mean, one was very strange. During the exorcism itself, Joseph went into a trance. He talked in an old woman's voice. He made contact with an old woman. That upset the exorcist, because the exorcist's philosophy is you do not open your mind. So a psychic and an exorcist, they don't gel. We found that out. And it was strange to hear a grown man talk in the voice of an old woman. But then our blinds rattled, which kind of freaked everybody out because they had sealed the house. Every door and window was closed. So I think Carol Simpson on the news makes the mistake, and she says a gust of wind came through the window and rattled the blinds. There was no open windows, so, I don't know if she worded that later or whatever, but she made a mistake.
She was probably wishing it was a gust of wind through the window.
Yeah, we were frightened. If you look at the footage, Renee, at the 1.5 minute mark on that YouTube footage, go to the first exorcism or true haunting on YouTube. At the 1.5 minute mark, you're going to look at a dark doorway, and you're going to see something white start to come through it and back off. No one thinks anything of that except for the first time I saw it, because I knew that we were all behind the camera, that the man wanted everything, including the dog and cat. Everybody had to be behind the camera. He wanted a blank shot. So what you're seeing there is a ghost, is an entity, and it caused me to, because Paranormal Witness is owned by NBC, I made an overture to get all the film. I wanted all the footage because they had shot 2 days, and I knew they weren't looking for anything. And I wanted the film, and only to find out that every bit of it was lost, which was highly unusual, and everybody said it was unusual. But every bit of the film was lost, so I never got to see any more of it.
That's strange.
But yeah, it failed, and Joseph wound up holding our hands. Carol Simpson for a long time called and was concerned and held our hand, and the exorcist, until we were finally able to get out of the building. And
how did you leave, and what happened? Where did you go? What'd you do at the building?
There's a story that I can't tell because we just don't have enough time how I got out of it, but we did wind up moving. I still own the building, so I attempted to sell it. It failed. The salesman failed. He basically eventually approached me and said, "It's impossible. I don't know why I can't sell this building." I then told him the gory truth. I figured he was going to laugh at me, and I said, "It's Ron, it's haunted." And he looked at me and he said, "Really?" And his eyes got big, and he got excited. And he was a young man, maybe more my sister's age. Him and his wife thought it was neat, and he said, "I don't have the money, but I'd buy that house in a second." And I was ignorant, but I said, "Is there any facility where I can just merely transfer the mortgage?" I said, "You could have my escrow account, $400. You can have everything in the house, all my tools, window air conditioners. Just take it off my hands." Well, Illinois has what's called a quit claim deed, and for $10 legal tender, you can transfer responsibility to a building or a piece of real estate. He quickly prepared one the next day. His secretary was a notary, and I signed the paper. He never gave me the $10, and I just tapped his desk and said, "Tap, no, take back." It's yours now. And Marsha and I never looked back, and we never attempted to tell our story. We wanted no attention, so we delisted our phone number. We had one sneaky reporter who misrepresented. He said he was from NBC on behalf of Carol Simpson. It turned out he was from the National Tattler.
Oh, jeez.
So Marsha fell for it, and she wound up. He distorted the whole article anyway. But movie people were after us, and we just ran. And we didn't want anything to do with paranormal, and I never did. Other than, my daughter's name should be on my book, because I kind of expected, if the book was written, that again I'm going to face skepticism, ridicule, and all kinds of crap that I just don't need at my age. Instead, what I found was a very warm community of people that are very interested and accepting. So I've enjoyed having the book out, and yes, I'm writing a companion book now to it that'll tell the story of the first floor and give you Marsha's perception of everything that took place, because, frankly, I was working 16, 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
So that a lot of stuff took place that I had no knowledge of and really didn't want to know. As a man, that place drove me into despair. And when I did Paranormal Witness, it was actually the first time I ever talked in public. I broke down in tears. I stopped camera a couple times because it broke my back, my emotional back. I was a proud young man. I was the first landowner in my family. I was to protect my wife and child. And just leaving her there and having to go to work, knowing, once I got to the point to where I knew things weren't right, I carried tremendous guilt, and still do. And fortunately, my wife is very forgiving, and we're on our way to our 49th anniversary. So
that's great. Well, what happened to the house?
It's still there.
Yeah, and been sold. What we can tell.
Last I heard, it was foreclosed. It's been sold many, many times.
Right.
I'm guessing that about probably every time it's sold, a year later, it's up for sale again.
Is it occupied still?
Not that I know of.
No, she means ghost. Yeah.
No. I meant do people live there now?
Oh,
not right now. According to what I understand, and I find this out from my readers, it's empty and foreclosed.
Yeah.
Wow.
I hope no one lives there. I
wonder what would happen if the house was torn down and a new structure put there. Sometimes it still, whatever's there still remains just there on the property.
It would not change anything.
I don't have a clue. I don't want a clue.
Yeah.
I don't go to. Ever since then, I mean, I'm not a fearful man, but I do respect these energies, and people can be affected by them with attachments, with other things that can be made to have ill health. So I don't seek these things out. I do not. I mean, I've had invitations for paracons and to speak and to do this. I won't do any of that. I stay away from the paranormal as far as hands-on. We help people, Marsha and I, by email or by letter or by phone. When we can't, when it's too much for us, we turn it over to either paranormal. Everybody out there, a great site, www.paranormalsocieties.com. And you can look up your state and you can find investigators. Push a little button. If you're dealing with something real strong, the Order of the Exorcists.
Yes.
Archbishop Ron Fale. On my page is a page, edwinbecker.com. You can click on spiritual help, and it'll take you to a little experience that I had, and a button that'll take you directly to their site.
Great.
And these are Catholic exorcists, and they do the job. So. And
you can also get the book through your website.
You can get to my website. Typically, I mean, I broke all sales records for ebooks with my publisher, which that actually landed me as being a best-selling author, if that means anything. To me, titles are for cars, so it's a nice thing to know that I sold lots of units. But Amazon is probably the most popular site that people go to, and Barnes & Noble secondary, and then there are some brick-and-mortar stores that are starting to disappear, but there are a few that handle the book.
Right.
But Amazon.com, you'll get it in a couple days anyway. And the ebook, I priced it very affordably because I was more interested in readers than I am. At 69 years old, I don't need a new car. I don't need a diamond ring. I don't need anything.
Everybody go and get the book True Haunting. It's an amazing story, and it looks like we're all out of time. And I want to thank you both, Ed and Marsha Becker, for joining me tonight and sharing your personal story. It's just amazing. And thank you also for helping other people that are going through the same thing.
Oh, you're welcome. It was so wonderful, Renee. Thank you so much.
Yes,
thank you
for having us.